Hey everyone, Emmerron here. This is going to wrap up our little Gen Con mini marathon of videos. So this one should be coming out the last day of Gen Con, which is going to be August 6th. This video was requested by one of my patrons for the month of August, Scott Gastineau, who wanted me to talk about a homebrew that came out, I think it's been about a month, maybe two at this point, which is a custom roll for Cyberpunk Red called the Breaker. It was made by Dice. So he has made this available for free on his Patreon. So I will link that in the description below. So that way, any of you who do want to pick this up and try it out in your games, you can. So a couple quick notes before we dive into the roll itself. Just some disclaimers. One, I have not tested this in any of my played games. I have not had the time to. It's been a pretty hectic time in the last month or so, especially as I've gotten closer to Gen Con. So I will be trying this in the future, probably at some point, because I do think it is very interesting, and I'll explain why in further detail as we go through the video. So first, I am not doing this off of played experience, simply based on my reading of the DLC and sort of what I understand the role to be and the role that it fulfills. I have spoken a little with Dice on this in the past. It's been a little bit since we've spoken about it. So Dice, if you're watching this and any of your thoughts have changed on it, if you need to correct me, by all means, the comments section is yours. Because I definitely don't want to misrepresent what you've made here by a lack of understanding. If I've misread or misinterpreted some element of it, I absolutely do want to be corrected if I need it. Thank you to all my patrons for the month of August. Your support makes doing what I do easier and allows me to do more with the time that I have. Thank you all so much. If you would like to support me in what I do, please join these fine people by following the link in the description below. Now back to the video. Thank you all. Let's talk about the roll. So what exactly is a breaker? To just first start with that idea. So a breaker is a sort of a hybrid between two of the existing roles in the game, but rather than forcing a player to multi-roll and take parts of one and parts of another and making that kind of weird, what Dice has done is simplified aspects of the Netrunner and the tech and basically thrown them together, and this is the hybrid identity that we're getting in the form of Breaker. So the Breaker's roll ability is called Tap It. And so essentially what this can allow the Breaker to do is create specialized electronic keys that can bypass security locks. Their love for ciphers and code has also led them to be able to encrypt, encode, and decode better than most. So these are professional cipher masters, essentially. They are built to use things like cryptography, which, as we have talked about yesterday, is one of those skills that largely in Cyberpunk Red, I feel is underutilized. So Dice has basically made this role in a way to give some of those skills additional utility. And I think he's done a pretty good job of really establishing those skills as having identity and interactivity within the role itself. So let's talk a little deeper about this. So whenever a breaker gains a rank in Keymaker, and I believe maybe this is an outdated one, but yeah, whenever they gain a rank in Tap It, which is the roll ability, they either gain a point in Cipher or Keyscript. At rank 5, Snoop comes into play, which allows them to descramble and listen in on local secure radio communications. So in theory, you can do this with another role using a radio scrambler and descrambler, and potentially some cryptography if it's heavily like encoded or something. And this is something you could do with any edge runner of any role realistically, as long as you have the tools and the know-how. Again, this is kind of gluing together some identities here, and making that more a part of this role's identity within the game, right? So the first specialty we have for Tappet is Cypher. Your obsession with codes, encryptions, puzzles, and solving what can't be solved has turned you into someone who can connect links not many can see. When not humoring the latest conspiracy on the data pool, you can lend your mind to understanding how to breach security measures. Ranks gained in Cypher will grant +1 to any basic tech or electronic security tech skill check that is used to unlock or use an electronic device, vehicle, or door. You also gain this bonus to any library search, cryptography, deduction, and science cryptology skill checks. You gain a rank in Cypher at rank 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 of Tappet. Keyscript. You don't mind sharing your skills to those who pay well. Utilizing a computer and a tech tool, you are able to decode an electronic key that can bypass electronic locks entirely, be it doors, containers, or even vehicles. The key is only as good as long as what you're using it on hasn't changed its security encoding, and you do need a sample of that security code first to make a good one. Ranks gained in Keyscript allow use of a pre-made electronic key that unlocks an electronic lock safely as long as the user is within 2 meters or yards. So again, going to be within touching distance essentially of the door. Keyscript generated keys may bypass any locks without requiring a skill check to do so. The use of the key is limited by the rank of Keyscript as well as how many times it may be used as a simple in a simple gig. It is required to have a pre-existing security code sample from where or what you are trying to break into to generate a functioning key. You gain a rank in Keyscript at rank 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 of Tappet. So you are essentially going to start with a rank 4 breaker with 2 ranks in Cypher and 2 ranks in Keyscript. So you are going to have the ability to gain skill bonuses on your breaching abilities and decoding abilities essentially, and also get an ability that allows you to manufacture electronic security keys essentially. So unlike netrunners or techs, you are more directly just interfacing with locks. So you're not really going to be dealing with other security measures within the local area to any major extent. You are mostly just going to be breaking locks, breaking encryption, listening in on things. So you're kind of like an espionage type character, which is cool. I think the only character archetypes that I can think of that the base roles give us that kind of fill that niche are generally Netrunner and Solo. Because you can make a really sneaky Solo with like high dexterity, high stealth, and all that, and make them either a melee or a sniper, or give them a bit of both. And with Netrunners, you kind of want to be stealthy and undetectable because, again, you're breaching their network. So the lighter your footsteps are when you walk into a place you're not supposed to be, the more health you have remaining when you get into the net, and now everything is against your core health. Again, we've talked a little bit about net running in the past here as it applies to GMs. I'll link that video up here. I do plan on doing a net running primer in the near future because it is a role that I am very familiar with. I'm very passionate about. I do enjoy it quite a bit, and I think that it gets overlooked because it looks very complex on the outside when it really isn't on the inside. You just need to understand a couple of core things. So we'll cover that in another video. But to continue on this, so we have one more specialty. So this kicks in at rank 5. So you have Snoop. So Snoop, sometimes you like being nosy, but most of the time it helps knowing what the world is talking about around you. Using your computer and a handmade antenna, you convert your computer into a listening post with limited range. You take 30 minutes to set up your listening post. Any radio communications received are descrambled and audible for you. The range of the listening post is limited by ranks in Snoop. You are not able to broadcast, only listen. You gain a rank in Snoop at rank 5, 7, and 9 of Tap It. So you can get up to 3 ranks in this, essentially. And then below that, we are going to start talking about kind of like what that's going to give you as we kind of discover each one. So now we're going to talk about the rank up bonuses here. So Tap It rank 1, you gain Cypher. So you get +1 to all skill checks using library search, cryptography, deduction, and science cryptology. You gain +1 to lock focus skill check using the basic tech and electronics / security tech skills. Tap It rank 2, key script. Gain the ability to encode electronic keys using computer and tech tool. This process usually takes 30 minutes, but it can take up to an hour. Electronic keys at this rank may only be used once. Electronic keys may be used at this rank to bypass a lock up to a DV11, which your GM determines. Memory chips are what are used to create these electronic keys. So you're going to sacrifice a memory chip, which are really cheap. I think they're 10 eddies a piece, for you to make a key. So you're basically creating like a USB thumb drive that you're sitting in to break a lock. And it's one-time use when you're this low. So security library is the next thing you get at rank 2. A sample of the security code at where an electronic key will be used is required to encode one. For vehicles, this can be any vehicle of the same make or model. This information can also be purchased. The sample is stored on normal memory chips and only good for simple gigs. So simple is, again, going to be like 500 eddies payout. They're going to be the simple go get it kind of gigs, right? You're not breaking into a bank doing this. Tap It rank 3 Cypher. Gain +1 to all skill checks using library search, cryptography, deduction, and science cryptology. Get +1 to lock focus skill checks using basic tech and electronic security tech. So just, again, your skill bonuses. Tap It rank 4. So this is where we are going to be starting if we make a breaker at the beginning of the game. So key script. Electronic keys may be encoded to be used up to 2 times before becoming spent. Electronic keys may now be used to bypass an electronic lock up to DV13, which your GM determines. Security library. A single security algorithm may now be stored permanently by the breaker on their computer. A security algorithm is only obtained by access to the root of a net architecture by a netrunner. The saved algorithm is for business, location, or vehicle line. This may not be corporation-wide. So basically, if you're dealing with like a large corporation like Militech or Arasaka or something on that level, there's a very good chance that they're using various encryption keys across, different sites, certainly between different cities. And so this is gonna only be as good as the security and IT teams are at whatever corporation you're messing with, or whatever locks you're trying to break. So the worse their IT, the longer this is going to last, and the better this is probably going to pay off for you. So now we go past the beginner ranks. So Tap It rank 5. So we got Cypher. Gain +1 to skill checks using library search, cryptography, deduction, and science cryptology. Gain a +1 to lock focus skill checks. So again, we're not going to keep repeating that more than that. Snoop. You're able to convert your computer into a listening post after 30 minutes of setup and tuning. You're able to listen in to communications done by radio and to scramble within a 1 mile radius. So that's where we get our first description of what Snoop does at its lowest rank. So basically, radio communications are what you're limited to. So Tap It rank 6, key script. Electronic keys can now be encoded to be used up to 3 times before becoming spent. Electronic keys may now be used to bypass an electronic lock up to DV15, which your GM determines. Tap It rank 7, Cypher. You get a +1 to skill checks that use library search, cryptography, deduction, and science cryptology, and +1 to lock focus skill checks using basic tech and electronic security tech. Snoop, your listening post now has a range of 3 miles and can isolate specific conversations with a successful basic tech skill check. Tap at rank 8, key script electronic keys may be encoded to be used up to 4 times before becoming spent. Electronic keys may now be used to bypass an electronic lock up to DV17, which your GM determines. And then security library, a total of 3 security algorithms may now be stored on your computer for later use. So now that's like where we start getting really powerful. Now rank 9, you again get +1s to all skill checks that involve, library search, cryptography, deduction, science, cryptology, and +1 to lock focus skill checks using basic tech and electronic security tech. So again, these are cumulative. So at this point, in addition to whatever your stat and skill bases are for those skills, you've got a +4 at rank 9. So you could theoretically, if you've min-maxed the hell out of it and you've gotten enough IP, you could end up with a 22 skill base in all of these skills because you're gaining +4 from each stack of this. Snoop at rank 9, your listening post now has a range of 5 miles, can isolate specific conversation with a successful basic tech skill check. You're now able to disable and scramble communications within a 1 mile radius, but this affects everyone in the area, even you and your crew. So you can put a jammer down essentially, but it's going to be, indiscriminate. It doesn't care if you're friendly or not. And then tap at rank 10. Electronic keys can now be encoded to be used up to 5 times before becoming spent. Electronic keys may also be used now to bypass an electronic lock up to DV21. So that's really, really powerful. Like, that is some of the strongest electronic locks in the game. They're going to be that high. And then security libraries, you no longer require a netrunner to extract a security algorithm for your library. You need only have it hands-on access yourself and a memory chip. So that's pretty good. That's really good. So then, he has done a table up for Street Rat and Edge Runner character creation. He's given base skills for that, same purpose. He's given an outfit for that. Role life paths, which, again, you're running the generic life path described in the core rulebook. The role life path, you're asking, what's your obsession as a breaker? Where do you have your computer hub to work? What or who do you enjoy ruining the day of, which is really fun. Basically like some Watch Dogs stuff. Who do you usually do business with? And what is your one rule? And so it's a code, basically. So with this, we've kind of come to the end of the description for the breaker. Again, I'll link to this, and it's, like I said, very possible that I maybe have an outdated version of it because I did get a beta version originally, and I may have saved that instead of the final one. So whatever Dice has up on his Patreon should be the most current version. So if I've misspoken or if anything is different on his version than mine, that is probably why. So let's start talking about what I think of the role. So my friends and I have discussed a couple times before, either during some of the post-game chats we did for Neon Inferno while we were still making those episodes for season 1. Every week at the end of our show, we would do kind of just like a little hangout at the end with whoever was left in chat and discuss all kinds of stuff. So one of the things we talked about is what would a role look like? What would a homebrewed role look like? What space is really left to occupy? Because if you think about it, right, you've got face roles in this game in the form of Media Rocker Boy Fixer. You've got violence-focused roles in the form of solos of all shapes and sizes. Nomads can fill this role pretty reliably. Lawmen can also fit this role pretty reliably because they have backup. So, you got 3 violence roles and they all are pretty distinct. One is team focused, one is going to be vehicle focused, one's going to be straight up violence focused. And then you've got your technicals, which are your med tech, your regular tech, and your netrunner. Which are all different technical specializations. And on top of all of that, you have the catch-all kind of jack of all trades, the exec, because their teamwork ability literally lets them fill gaps in their skill base or in their capability base by just hiring someone else from their company that can do whatever the thing is that they're lacking. So it was really interesting for me to kind of like we asked this question. I think it was shortly before Dice talked to me about this. And ultimately, it really kind of lent to some thinking that I was doing about, okay, like, what would a role look like? Well, the role, for a homebrew role, if we're adding on top of the base core rulebook ones, it fits in between, the spaces between, where you've got kind of a little bit of tech and a kind of a little bit of Netrunner, and both of these can kind of sort of do the things that a breaker can do here. But the breaker just says, well, if you just want to be the 90s sci-fi film hacker man, and you want to just be a script kiddie to some extent, right? You're not a full-fledged Netrunner. You're not like actively hacking their systems or anything. You're just trying to be the guy with the key card that just swipes in the door and says, I'm in. And then you just enter the facility. That is what a breaker is. You are a tech that has some of the, bells and whistles of what like a Netrunner can do with regard to breaching a complex. But your main goal is to be that espionage archetype that we maybe just don't see that much of in the game otherwise. And so I think that this is a really, really solid attempt at filling some of those gaps. My mind strains a little bit to think of some of the other holes that exist. And this is why I don't write a whole lot of homebrew of this kind, because I can think of custom items and situations, traps, even gigs all day easily. Doing all this work for a role, it's very time consuming, and it does require testing. It requires adjustments, and that's time and such that I personally just don't want to take on top of other projects that I'm working on. But ultimately, I think that the stats given to it do look very balanced. Obviously, this is going to lean hard into intelligence and tech. There's going to be, smart, technically proficient kind of people that are going to be, focused on making this and, running this kind of a character. We're looking at this role through the lens of wanting to be that thing that sits in between these more established identities. And both of those, intelligence and tech, are things that like a Netrunner will typically take because they're trying to do elements of this. But this just does them better. And this thing also can listen into calls and radio comms and be really like that, like again, the security infiltrator. So you could give them like, some light arms, like handguns and stuff like that. You could up the stakes if you really wanted to. You could give them like a shotgun or something. But this seems like a very quiet type of character. So yeah, my first impression of this, the only criticism I think I may have of it is the DVs for doing like listening and stuff like that. Those aren't really spelled out beyond, like the obviously it explains DVs for like what you can use your security codes on. But it doesn't really explain like, okay, if you're listening, if you're using Snoop, right? You're trying to listen to communications. What is the DV I'm rolling against to receive those communications? There should be some standard DV that I'd roll against for that. And so without having that in the document, it does feel like that is a little weird, because it's like, this is realistically something that only the breaker can do. And so I think of it in the same vein as like charismatic impact for a rocker boy, where they've got like very specific DVs they roll against at each rank to allow them to, win over an audience or something. And so this feels like something where there should be some DVs involved. And because the thing you're listening into doesn't have like a price category, like, say like a weapon or a piece of gear would have, we could if it did, we could extrapolate it kind of along the repair table that you use your tech abilities for to repair items, to working order when they break. Like we could extrapolate that, but that again doesn't really seem as though that's really a thing. So that's kind of weird. So I mean, like we could just extrapolate it along the baselines for like what they write in the core rulebook. Like if it's like a really simple signal, then maybe it's only a DV9. If it's a like a more complex one that requires like professional grade listening equipment, we're looking maybe a DV13 or 15. But like again, just some like clarity on that point would probably be helpful, to kind of really like nail down like this is what the breaker is expected to be able to like listen into, or like what they're rolling against to get that information given the criteria we're looking at. But yeah, ultimately I think that's my only real complaint for anything that might be missing. The rest of this is very reasonable, and the vast majority of this is very like you're that either espionage or conspiracy theorist, and you're trying to make sure you're not getting bugged and stuff like that. So it's very flavorful in that regard. It gives a use for computers, which is admittedly a piece of gear that I don't really think sees quite enough use. And so that might be a subject of a how to GM video in the future. So I think this is a good homebrew. I think it is a good role. It does fill a gap that doesn't quite elegantly exist in the core roles, other than, like I said, kind of multi-rolling a tech and a netrunner, which again isn't really that elegant. So like this is a much more elegant way to kind of achieve that power fantasy without making you overpowered, being able to do kind of the one function of each of two other roles. But yeah, ultimately that's, I think, where we're going to kind of end this video. So Scott, thank you for recommending this subject. Any of you who do want to support me on Patreon like Scott did and request videos, the $10 tier on my Patreon does allow you to do that. And I will try to prioritize that as much as I can, along with other projects and work that I am doing. So please do let me know. If you sign up to that and you have a video topic that you do want me to discuss, I'd be more than happy to do that and make that a priority for you all. But as always, if you have anything you think I've missed, definitely let me know in the comments, and let me know what you think about this if you run it in your games, because I would love to hear on the ground perspectives, as I currently don't have one, and would love to hear that expanded upon. But I think that's going to do it for the episode. So again, my name is Emmerron. Please feel free to like and subscribe if you feel I've earned it. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful morning, evening, or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Stay healthy, stay safe, and until we speak again, peace.